everybody. Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winter Brill. We're here with Larry Mandelberg. He is the author of Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide: How to Survive Success and Thrive in Good Times and Bad. Larry, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Taryn. It's great to be here.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Let's talk about the title. I mean, it really grabs you, talking about suicide, a little bit of a shock value there. Tell us about the genesis of the title.
Yeah, I tend to be a little bit of an in-your-face kind of a guy.
Okay.
One example, I wrote an article called Nobody Knows Anything. I like to be controversial.
Yeah,
and
love it.
I was being interviewed by a publicist about the value of my brand, my consulting brand. Mm-hmm. And she asked me to talk about businesses and why they had trouble, why they failed. And I didn't even realize it at the time. This was in 2014. I just said, businesses don't fail, they commit suicide. And it never registered. Years later, she came back to me and she said, I heard you're writing a book. And I said, yeah. And she says, guess what? I have the title of your book. I said, okay, tell me. She told me. And then she said, this was your words. I didn't even remember it was my words. Amazing,
bingo. Yeah. So you like to kind of push the button a little bit. Just to question that article you said, what was it called? Nobody knows anything?
Nobody knows anything.
So did somebody know something after reading it? I mean, was
absolutely,
that?
Absolutely.
How did you quantify that?
Here's another one. They don't teach you how to do business in business school.
I mean, is that true? Because I have so many friends that have gotten MBAs and they say it's more about the connections, not really the work.
If you've ever seen Rodney Dangerfield's movie Back to School,
yeah,
perfect example, right? He talks about bribes, he talks about relationships, he talks about leverage, he talks about getting debts where he can call his debts, right? The Godfather. Yeah. I mean, that's the way business is done. Those movies highlight some of the illegal aspects of it. But that's the way business is done. You have to be able to develop relationships, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know.
It's who you know. So, I mean, the other thought that came to mind once I saw the title of the book, I thought to myself, all right, well, is this based on personal experience? Have you committed suicide in your business ventures? Maybe not once, maybe twice, three times. Tell us about that.
Sadly, I have.
Okay.
I even talk about that in the book. I say, listen, I have firsthand experience of this. I've committed my suicide myself with my businesses.
But you're still here. The businesses are still here.
Well, and this brings up a good point. I did have several people say to me that they were disturbed by the title. For good reason. Suicide's a very serious thing, and it's a very personal thing, and for anyone who's been touched by it, it's tragic.
True, yeah.
I have spoken to a number of suicide support groups nationwide. Every one of them says, not a problem. And there are reasons for that, which I can share, but this is not about human suicide. This is about doing something foolish that is ill-advised, that causes your business to fail. And it's a play on words. It's me being me, right? It's excessive.
It's being blunt, but also there's a lot of books out on the market. You have to grab people's attention, and I think it does, right? I mean, it is a play on words, and obviously you can tell it's a business book. But I think our viewers would like to know that you've done your research and you did speak to these organizations and sort of got the green light. So that's good to know. Now, before we get into what so many businesses are doing wrong, I found it interesting, Larry, as I was reading through the book. At the age of 12, you write that a certain question intrigued you. Why do businesses fail? This is a question you're asking yourself as a 12-year-old.
Yes.
I have to say, I've been 12. I was not asking. I have some experience being 12. I was not asking myself that particular question, but that's another story. Why? Tell us why that was in your heart and soul.
My family, I'm fifth generation in a family-owned business. We started in the 1850s in hides and furs.
Right.
And it evolved over the last, well, at this point, 170 years, 175 years, through a whole series of industries, and the collective wisdom of my family members was carried forward. So everything about my life when I grew up was about doing business.
Interesting.
My father said, you're going to go to work if school doesn't start till 8 o'clock in the morning, because business starts at 6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And if you don't have something after school, you're going to come back to work because work doesn't stop at 3 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So, this business puts this roof over your head, and you know the line.
The drill, yeah.
I have to say it sounds a little harsh. It was fabulous. I didn't mind it. I loved it. it's part of the foundation of my competitive advantage today.
Sure.
It's given me an appreciation for business. I've owned more than a dozen businesses. I've dabbled in clothing, I've dabbled in retail, I've dabbled in construction, had 3 technology firms. It's fascinating to me how you can put money and people into a business that has a valuable product that people want and need, and that business fails.
Right.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, tell us from your personal experience, multiple businesses you've run, the ones that didn't work, a lot of those principles are in the book. Give us
Yes.
a little sneak peek, some nuggets.
So there are 3, what I call fundamental imperatives. And it's the only reason any business ever fails within a particular demographic. I want to be clear about this. I did a lot of research, and I couldn't do every type of business that exists. So the demographic is clearly defined in the book, and within that demographic, there's only 3 reasons a business ever fails.
Right.
Lack of clarity of purpose, lack of consistency of performance, lack of engagement of people.
The 3
Call it the 3 Ps.
Yes.
That's right. If you aren't clear about the value you deliver and the people it's valuable to, and the manner in which you're going to deliver it to them, then you can't get anybody on board and gain momentum as a cohesive group of people in an organization.
Right.
You end up trying to sell anything to anybody, and that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. It seems so obvious, though, Larry, the 3 things you just mentioned, but clearly some of your businesses have failed, and you just related something that seems obvious. So you clearly weren't following the 3 Ps in some of your enterprises that failed?
Without question, I failed in those 3 Ps. And part of why that is because I wasn't aware that I needed to fulfill them.
Yeah.
Right? I would say that the biggest problem in my failures has to do with consistency of performance. And that came about because I was trying to operate at a particular level of organizational maturity, which is I talk about in the book, without getting fully grounded in purpose.
Right.
And this is the most common for mid-sized or intermediate businesses. They feel like we know exactly why we're here, we know exactly what our purpose is, we know exactly what our value is, we know exactly what our markets are. Now all we got to do is be consistent. When you talk to the people, you talk to the employees, if you talk to 100 employees, you'll get 80 or 90 different answers as to this is the value we provide.
Right.
They don't have clarity of purpose. So those 2 things are very closely related, and the sad thing is that they're really very easy to do if you understand you need to do them.
Yeah.
But not having that understanding of how clear and deeply ingrained those things need to be in everybody, it's hard to know to do that.
Sure. So when was the aha moment for you where you connected the dots?
Well, it was as I was doing the analysis on the data. So I interviewed 250 different people from 150 different companies, and as I was putting that data together and aggregating, I suddenly was realizing, oh my God, these people think they know what they're doing, and there's this massive variety of perceptions about the value the company delivers.
Right. Wild, I'd imagine.
You just wouldn't think that, but it's true.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be radical. I mean, it's like, look, if you're selling ice cream, people aren't worried about making your car run better. That's not the point. The point is this about ice cream? Is this about food? Is this about an experience? Is this about flavor? Is this about happiness? Is this about relieving pain? Why are people coming in here? What is the real magic behind what we do?
No, it's absolutely true, because when you put it like that, it seems so obvious what we do, but there's so many elements that go into it.
Right.
So, simple question, why are you so passionate about helping businesses so that they don't fail?
It's a great question. It's a little complicated, so let me try and keep it tight. I believe that the problems that this country faces right now, with the divisions and the turmoil, are a function of a lack of knowledge. We have an unsuccessful education system, and I believe it is the obligation of every business owner to support education, because without educated students, we have no employees to run businesses. You take that one step further, and if we have educated people, I want them to be happy. And the only way people can be happy is if they're doing a job that they love and if they're treated properly. So you take that to the next level and you say, how do you create an organization where everybody loves their job and is treated by their bosses and their managers the way they should be, with respect, with consideration.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the owners and you say, how do I make you a happy boss?
Right.
That's what that book is about. It's about understanding how to create that sense of joy so that everybody that wants a job has one and loves it, and everybody that has employees treats them properly.
Yeah.
And when you do those things, you attract the people who care about your purpose, and you repel the ones who don't.
Right.
And when you bring them together and you treat them with respect, they want to perform at high levels, so you get the performance. And you get the same levels of concern and passion, so you end up with engagement.
Right. Well, something you brought up, and I was going to mention, you read my mind. I love the fact that you believe that every business owner has a moral obligation to support education initiatives. But there's been a lot of talk lately about education and the workplace, and is a 4-year college degree necessary anymore? Perhaps trade school is the way to go. So when you talk about education, can you dig a little deeper for us? I mean, based on all of your experience, all the research, and having successful businesses, is a 4-year degree necessary?
Yes, and for reasons that most people don't understand.
Okay.
The reason a 4-year degree is, I will call it critical for most people, is because of the social experience you get from it. Remember, it's the first time a child is on their own, managing their own money without their parents' oversight, making decisions about what they're going to do every day the way they're going to have to the rest of their life.
Right.
And yet there's still a bit of a protective shield or a bit of a bubble.
Yeah.
In terms of education, I don't think it's at all critical.
Yeah.
But it's a social experience, which is why I don't think it's necessary for a 4-year traditional college. As long as you can find that safe place to get out and learn what it's like to be in the world.
Yeah.
And there's 2 more things I'll say about that. The first is, it's not knowledge that's valuable. What's valuable is experience.
Yeah, it's the life experience.
It's experience. And I like to say it's about how much experience you have underneath you, how much life you have underneath you. The other thing that I want to say about education is that we are too hung up on teaching people technical, tactical skills. What we should be teaching people is the joy of learning. If I can teach you how to learn and enjoy the experience, whatever you're interested in, you'll go learn it.
I think maybe if grades were eliminated, that might work, or if a pass-fail system was incorporated into every school, there'd eliminate some of that pressure and take, bring back more of the joy. At least that was my experience.
That's part of it.
Yeah,
that's part of it.
I want to go back for a second, Larry. You mentioned the organizational maturity as foundational to the findings in your book, and you talk about, I think it was youth, adolescence, and adult, these stages of businesses. Curious, real-world examples. You think about Facebook, right? Hugely successful. Mark Zuckerberg, he's known as he was a very young CEO. So what do you attribute their success to? Because that started in the youth phase, would you say? Or what was their plan like?
It's a great question, and they're outside the demographic of my research.
Okay.
Because my research is bounded by business to business, not retail. No primary sources of revenue from retail activities.
Okay, so just business to business.
Just business to business. And autonomous, meaning there's no external factors pushing the business to do something that's not in the best interest of the business. So with Facebook, they're catering to the markets. They're catering to the investors.
Got it.
Now I can talk about the evolution of Facebook. That's a little bit of a different story.
Okay,
though.
Got it. Okay, so that answers my question. So I was trying to figure out how a story like that falls into this model. And speaking of retail, you say in retail the customer is always right, but in non-retail, B2B or wholesale, the customer is always wrong.
Yep.
Again, controversial. I love it.
Absolutely.
How do you mean?
Well, if I'm walking into a department store to buy clothing, and I'm with my wife, and she wants a blouse that's ugly, and I know it's ugly, and the clerk knows it's ugly, and my wife says it's beautiful, I love it. What do you say? You say, that's beautiful, honey. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, you go support.
When I go to a business and I say, what's your problem? They always have an answer, and it's always wrong. Because all they're seeing are the symptoms. They're not seeing the underlying issues. I can give you a classic example. We did a project for an organization that helps place orphans. And they were struggling because they were getting such a large caseload for all of their social workers that they couldn't take care of all the kids.
Right.
So they came to me and they said, help us figure out how to solve this problem. When we dug in, what we found was the problem was not the social workers, the problem was they didn't have enough families. So they were focusing all on the kids and getting them placed, not on recruiting families. So they were running out of places to put kids, good places to put kids,
Right.
which caused them to put kids in bad places,
Yeah.
which caused them to not stay, which caused unnecessary overhead for the social workers. That's a classic example of, I know what the problem is, our social workers aren't productive enough. No, that's not the problem. That's what I mean.
Gotcha.
And it's, every good leader will agree with that. Every good leader will. I was watching something the other day on TV and they said, you asked me if I was a good man or a bad man. How did you know? What made you decide to trust me? And the guy says, only a bad man would say he was good. Only a good man would say he didn't know.
Okay. All right.
And I've spoken to CEOs who were interviewing me to hire, and I can remember one situation. I was speaking to this person, not going to use gender or industry, but
Yeah.
I was saying, we have to be able to have direct, honest conversations. I have to be able to tell you things that you're not going to like, that are going to potentially upset you, and they cut me off and they said, stop. If you're trying to tell me I'm a lousy CEO, that's why you're sitting here.
Right. Tough love.
I said, okay,
There
I'm
you go.
ready.
So let me ask you, Larry, all that said, why does success cause so many problems?
Because it brings change. Oh, what a great question.
And change is the source of problems?
Failure.
Yeah.
Businesses fail because they are faced with change that they don't have experience dealing with.
Right.
So they have to make decisions that aren't based on facts or prior experience, and it's those decisions that, when they're not right, cause problems. The bigger the problem, the bigger the issue with the organization, and if they're big enough, it can be fatal and kill the company.
So give us kind of one element without giving too much away. So how do you prepare for that change? How do you prepare for that pivot without failing?
There is a process built into my system, which I talk about,
Yeah.
that develops foresight, for one, and for another, it develops an understanding, a different approach to change. Whenever I do a presentation, I always ask the audience, how many of you, generally speaking, think people like change? And
Yeah.
20 people, nobody raises their hand.
Right.
50 people, 100 people, they'll get a few people raise their hand. Okay. How many of you think, generally speaking, nobody likes change? Everybody's hands go up. So their hands are up and I say, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. You're crazy. Every single person loves change. Every one of you. Everybody.
Yeah.
It's not change they don't like. It's change done unto them by others.
Exactly.
Everybody loves the change they do unto others, not the change done unto them.
Right.
So it's about looking at how you deal with change in a way that your organization can absorb it, embrace it, and make it theirs.
Right. So it's the change done by others. So all of that said, so much to get into. I wanted to ask you about the arc of success. I wanted to get into some other premises that you discuss. If I'm starting a new business so that I don't fail, what's the one takeaway from the book that's most important to not, quote unquote, commit suicide?
It's really very, very simple. Understand your value and be true to it.
Yeah.
Don't waver from it. Understand your value. Recruit people who are passionate about it. Find that long-term vision that you want. Understand the kind of culture you want to have, the way you want to treat people and be treated by others.
Yeah.
Look for people who have the same core values as you, so that when questions exist, people can react because they know it's what they should do, not because they know what the rules are or the
Right.
boundaries are. That's the most important thing. Don't get hungry and greedy. Understand your value.
Yeah. Yep. I would say for anyone looking to start a business, and I know you said it's not retail, but B2B, but the formula in here, it's how you put it all together. It's an easy read and it makes a lot of sense because a lot of it seems very obvious, but it's not. but you kind of weave it together into a very nice quilt, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of great anecdotes as well. You mentioned a couple, but we couldn't get to all of them.
Yeah.
But what's next? Maybe how to create successful businesses?
I'm already working on the second edition of this, and I'm working on a second book called, I think the current title is Business by Larry, which talks about my proprietary way of approaching a business.
Nice.
But my goal right now is to share this information with as many people as I can. I don't feel like this is my smarts. This is my labor to gather data, analyze it, develop a theory, provide a tool for people to measure their weaknesses so that now you can go into this tool and it'll tell you exactly where in your organization you need to focus your efforts.
Yeah.
That's my goal. I want to change the way business is done in this country, and however I can do that is what I want to do.
Because a lot of businesses are failing, and there's a lot of really important techniques in this book. Well, congratulations, and we can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, Larry.
My pleasure.
If you'd like more information on the book, just check out our website. It's c-suitebookclub.com. That's c-suitebookclub.com. I'm Taryn Winter Brill. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.
Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hazlett, and this is All Business. Hey everyone, Jeffrey Hazlett right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hazlett on C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio, and I've got a great show here today. So when it comes to getting what you want or would be happy with in life and or in business, negotiation is key. I know that very well in my family. Whether we realize it or not, we are negotiating every day, both in our professional and our personal lives, and we need to learn not only negotiation skills, but how to use them to our fullest advantage. My next guest truly feels all of life is a negotiation, and she's here to share with us some insights on how to succeed in negotiations. Cindy Watson is the author of The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. Founder and CEO of Women on Purpose, and also founder and managing partner of Watson Palmer Law. Cindy, welcome to All Business with Jeffrey Hazlett.
Well, it is great to be here, Jeffrey. Thanks for having me. I can't wait for the conversation.
Well, I'm scared to death of this conversation, and I hope my wife isn't watching. I hope my CEO is also a female, is not watching, or of course I know she does, and more than half of my staff as well. First off, I have to ask you this question. What is the art of feminine negotiation, and why should we be paying attention and learning this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be honest, I really agonized over whether to even use the word feminine. We're kind of moving away from gender, and it's not actually gender-based. I think both men and women, so you can rest assured, I think you're already a great negotiator, and both men and women can benefit from this. I really opted to use the word because I think for too long, Jeffrey, we've been defining success, in business, personally, across the board, based on a much more competitive, toughness carries the day, dare I say, more masculine kind of model. And as a result of that, I think that both men and women thought, geez, the only path to success is taking that model. So we stifled our so-called feminine traits, all of that sort of collaborative, rapport building, trust building, all of those skills. And that's been a mistake. I think it's one of the reasons the world's out of balance. And I know for myself, I was out of balance. So really at its core, what the art of feminine negotiation is just being able to get away from that competitive model and actually tapping in, ironically, to the key traits that make and mark the most effective negotiators, 5 out of 6 of which are so-called feminine traits. So that's what kickstarted me on this journey.
So you're saying that win at all odds is not the best way to go?
No, it's not. And I, in my practice as a lawyer, I'm the first to admit, I'm kind of embarrassed now, but my clients called me the Barracuda. And they meant that, of course, is the highest compliment, right? And I wore it like a badge of honor, like I think a lot of people in business do. We believe that if we're talking the loudest and the longest, if we are competing to get every last little piece on the table, that we're getting those best outcomes. But those are really short-lived victories. If you're actually looking to have better relationships, better buy-in, longer lasting agreements, more creative outcomes, then taking that competitive approach is actually the wrong way to go. And it gets to the point, I know for me, when people had said, oh, geez, I met so-and-so, they work with you. I was like, early in my career, I'm like, oh my God, because I knew they called me the other B word and it wasn't Barracuda. So there's definitely a high cost that comes with that.
Well, I've been called a lot of things myself over the years, and we'll be called some more things. But I got to ask you, what are the real key skills that are required for successful negotiations? I mean, obviously, you want to be very successful and win. I mean, that's it. Yeah. But to me, I've always looked for that win-win rather than I win, you lose, or you win, I lose. But what are some of the key skills required for successful negotiations?
Yeah, and I've created just a simple mnemonic, I think is the easiest way to remember. If you look at the 6 key skills that make and mark the most effective negotiators, and I'm talking like, across the world and throughout history, it comes down to assertiveness, rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust. So I call it the R-FIT model. Just think AREFIT. And ironically, you'll see like rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust. If you surveyed your audience, Jeffrey, I bet you that the vast majority, if not everybody, would consider those to be so-called feminine traits. And the one of the 6 that isn't considered typically to be feminine is assertiveness. But even that, I think it's because people confuse assertive with aggressive. And they're not the same thing, right? Assertiveness just means showing up with confidence. That confidence comes from knowledge, and knowledge comes from preparation. And we can all do that in spades. Too often we show up just looking to pound our chest. As a trade union labor lawyer for many years, I saw a lot of chest pounding and table bumping. And those did not make for the best outcomes. So if you get really intentional about showing up, listen more than you talk, park your ego and actually get curious, you are going to come up with some really surprising nuggets.
Yeah, Tricia Ben, our CEO of the C-suite, we would talk about when our hero leaders get together, which are our most valued CEOs that really run their businesses with people in mind more than profits. They take the armor off at the door. You don't need to come armed to negotiation. You have to come with a winning strategy that says, hey, we're going to both win out of this together. Now, we talked about some of the great things that are great skills to be able to have. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to negotiating?
Yeah, and I think some of this is definitely more a North American problem, to be honest. And one of them is just jumping straight to business, right? I mean, we tend to just jump right in, let's get to it, get her done kind of mentality. And really, we miss that entire rapport building, right? Asking the questions, getting curious, learning about the other person, because the stated needs in any negotiation are like the tip of the proverbial iceberg, right? And you're heading for that, Titanic, because really the gold is underneath the water. So when you can park your ego, and we're bad at that in North America as well, we make it all about us. If you can park your ego and get curious. So I would say bringing ego to the table, whether it's that need to win, not admitting you don't know, we assume it undermines us. The opposite is true, but also jumping straight to business, being too attached to an idea. It's like, I want this. I know this is my outcome. I need X. So I'm only focusing on getting X. And I know the other party wants Y. So I need to stop them from getting Y. When in fact, if we both come and don't get too attached and we allow ourselves to stay flexible, it is incredible how many times you can come up with solutions better than X or Y, something better, not even the win-win that, you talked about that win-win. Most people talk about that being, all right, somewhere between X and Y, we're going to find something we're comfortable with. And I'm like, no, why don't we look for Z? Why don't we look for AA, right? Something even better. And not listening, I would say, is the other really big mistake that people make in negotiations, right? We believe that if we're talking, we're dominating the conversation, that must mean we're winning. And, for me, and I was so guilty of that, I've now come to the point where if I recognize I'm talking more than the other person, it's like stop, drop, and roll, right? Just stop, listen, find a way to just start asking those questions. So I call them the 7 deadly sins.
So when coming to the table, it's important for you to be prepared for a negotiation. What should we be doing to get ready?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, some of the traditional things, I think are problematic, right? Everybody's just focusing on what they need. I actually have a couple of simple models, and I'll share one with your audience here. I call it the no fear model. You can tell I like acronyms, Jeffrey, right? So just think no fear, FER. Fear, ego, attachment, and reactivity. So I think preparation for any negotiation, whether it's personal or in your professional life, sit down at first and think, what are some of the fears that are driving me? Because most bullying, trying to control, trying to exert power over others instead of power with, comes from some fear for most of us, right? So when we really tap in, what are some of the fears that are going to be driving me about this issue or this negotiation? And what are the fears that are going to be driving the other party? And what are some things as part of your prep, Jeffrey, like actually build in, what are some things I can do to use their fear to sort of fuel us to get those better outcomes? Ego. Check in. How does ego show up for me? What are the different ways? It's different for all of us. For some, it's like, I need to be liked, right? So I end up people pleasing, don't get the best outcomes. For some, it's talking too much. So how does ego show up for me? And how does ego show up from my experience or what I've heard of the party I'm going to be negotiating with? And how can I use that again to my benefit? How can I how can I pander to that ego if I need to? How can I use that ego to get those best outcomes? That A, attachment we talked about earlier. What am I too attached to here? And what is the other party going to be attached to? How can I allow myself to be a little more flexible so that if an even better opportunity comes up, I'm not stuck back here in my attachment? And the R is reactivity. We've all got triggers, right? What are my triggers? What are the things that are likely going to set me off? And what can I do to ground myself so that I don't get triggered? But also, what are the other party's triggers? And how can I make sure I avoid that, right? And this applies both personally and professionally. And I can share really quickly with you, like a personal story that might sort of really show this.
Please do that.
And again, this isn't a business model, but I think sometimes when we share something really vulnerable and personal, the message sticks more, right? So my son got diagnosed early in COVID with a very serious mental health issue and ended up in the hospital. And so you can imagine, I was like, talk about negotiating. I was having to negotiate to get visiting rights at all. I was having to negotiate to get him resources that had all evaporated. But the thing I forgot to do myself was I didn't follow my own advice when I was interacting with him. He was so angry. And of course, I was so defensive, trying to let him know, we love you unconditionally. Here's why this. And all of a sudden I realized we were butting heads because I wasn't practicing my own art of feminine negotiation, no fear model. And I had to sit back and look, oh my God, like my fears, Jeffrey, you can imagine, like my attachment to what his life was supposed to look like, my hopes, my dreams for him. It was all about my ego. I was trying to defend myself to him. I was totally being in reactive mode. And then when I flipped and thought, oh my God, how terrifying must this be for him, where he feels he has no control whatsoever, locked up in the hospital, no access to make even the most basic decision for himself. So I showed up with intention next time, where I parked my ego, I let go of attachment, and I said, you know what? I am so sorry. I have been making this all about me. I can't even imagine what this experience has been like for you. And I'm here to listen. Tell me about it. Tell me about your experience. What can I do? And at first, of course, he didn't trust it. So be prepared for that for your listeners. They're going to push back. But when he did, Jeffrey, there was a physical softening that I saw, and it has opened the space for us to allow for myself to heal, for him to heal, and to move forward. And the same thing happens in business. I see it over and over again. Just by not applying a simple model like that, no fear, or decide who you want to be. I call it the 5W model. Who do you want to show up as? Who are they expecting you to show up? You know, when people expected me to show up as the big bitch and I showed up differently, wow, that was a powerful dynamic shift, right? So definitely.
Well, let me ask you this. That's a great story. And thank you for sharing. That's one of the big things that we do here in the C-suite, and certainly all business, is the sharing of the personal side, because the personal side is linked to so much of what we do on the professional side. You know, what was going through my head as you were talking about that story and the bit before it was how ingrained this is when we're very young on a personal side. I was sitting here flashing back to my daughter, who's now an adult about to have her own child, and my son, who has 2 children. And I can remember them negotiating. My daughter was excellent at it, by the way. She would go to her little brother and said, you really don't want that toy. You want this one, don't you? And she would convince him that, to switch because she wanted that toy, And I'm thinking about how much of that's ingrained, that we we're not thinking always about the other person and how we put them in the place of negotiation. We're thinking more about how it's going to feel for us, the benefits for our company, the benefits to me. How am I going to look? Am I going to be a winner? Am I going to, be the savior for our company or whatever? When do we come to realize that?
Well, I think sadly, some people never come to realize that. I think it's one of the reasons we're so out of balance now. And to be honest, when I was Barracuda, I'm not going to lie, it's not like I had no success. And that's the danger, right? Because it's like it affected my professional relationships, then my personal, and ultimately my sense of self. But it's not only that, the outcomes that I got were way more limited than I could know. It's kind of like being in a really bad relationship, right? We never get the perspective until we can take ourselves out of it. So I think raising our awareness about that deep conditioning and being willing at first to just take that leap of faith and try these other skills on and see how it goes at first, but really commit to it for a while where you show up differently to get those better outcomes. And that's when the shifts happen. Because when I was able to move away from Barracuda, I believed for the longest time, Jeffrey, I can't give that up because people are going to walk all over me. They're going to think I'm well, trust me, when I apply the art of feminine negotiation, nobody's going to push me off my mark unless I want to be pushed off my mark or I'm convinced that there are better alternatives there. So it's not about weakness. It's about reframing how we look at success and recognizing that there are better approaches to get better, deeper, longer lasting relationships and outcomes. Because ultimately negotiation is all about relationship. And that's the key shift.
Well, I think what you're also saying here is we don't have to check our gender at the door. We have
Absolutely.
to check the way we think about those things and then bring both sides to it. Now, and of course, in this entire, political climate about genders, I'm not trying to make a political statement here. I'm just saying there is a different way for us to approach it. We have to approach it from, a more simplistic side of it than just winning.
Yeah. And I love that you've raised that because gender is a hot button topic now. And I think the thing that doesn't get talked, it's become a blame game, blaming and shaming. And it drives me crazy because I think if we're ever going to have change, we have to recognize biases aren't just by men against women. Even forget the overt, the unconscious gender biases, which are more dangerous, I think, because they're insidious. It's women against other women, but it's also women against ourselves. Like they've actually done studies, Jeffrey, where they have young girls writing their SATs, check off their gender in advance of writing their test. And over again, those young women in the control group who had to identify their gender actually perform more poorly. So I agree with you. We have to start naming it, owning it, recognizing it, and get the conversation so that it moves away from gender. Because we're different. Like women will be called hysterical or emotional, where for the same behavior, men are going to be called passionate and fiery. Women will be called controlling and bossy when men are called strong leaders. Women are called sneaky and manipulative. Men are called strategic. So I think we need to recognize it and then flip the script we've been told around gender.
Let's face it, no matter how persuasive you are, there are times when you have to compromise during the negotiation. How do you determine what's acceptable to give up? Should you know about those things ahead of time? Should you think about the scenarios? What advice do you give?
Yeah, and absolutely. I think all of it comes down to preparation. I mean, I think preparation is actually, and some experts disagree, but most recognize preparation is at least as important. I think more important than your leverage and even more important than your skill set, to be often, Jeffrey. When you prepare for using that no fear model I talked about, or decide, with your 5 W's, where and when should we have the negotiation? What's my deep why? When you've done that preparation, part of it also is exactly what you said. The what of that 5W model is get absolute clarity about the outcomes. And most people are tunnel vision, thinking about what are the substantive things I want? What do I want to get, right? What do I need? And we forget process. Sometimes for business people, negotiating about the process can get you way better long-term results than, negotiating how you're going to price items, for example, will get you way more than getting the deal on this time. But the one that I find is most often forgotten about is your relationship outcomes. So absolutely build in, what do I want in terms of the substantive? What do I want for my relationship outcomes from this negotiation? What do I want in terms of process? And then you build that in. And part of it is concessions. All right, I don't want to be so attached. What are some concessions that I can strategically use during this negotiation to build rapport, to build that all-important trust, right? So get into that negotiation already knowing at the front end, but also know what your best alternative is. Let's call it your BATNA, right? if you don't know what your other alternatives, I've seen people walk away from great deals thinking that the grass was going to be greener, only to find out that they totally screwed themselves. But I've also seen people negotiate way past the point when it even makes sense for them anymore. So definitely know what your alternatives are to the deal, know what compromises you're prepared to make at the front end. Definitely have that line in the sand, your resistance point, as they call it. But also be prepared that if something better shows up, don't be so stuck on that you're not open to recognize, oh my God, there's a creative opportunity here. What if we go in this direction altogether? You know what? I could actually, let's forget the price for this thing we're arguing about. Do you know I have contacts across the country that I could share with you? You're going to make infinitely more money. And then we cut a deal that's different than what either of us anticipated walking into that negotiation.
You always have to be ready for that wild thing that comes in. Sometimes it's a pony and sometimes it's a donkey. So you have to figure out which one there is. Hey, I love your thing about the process. I'll give you a great example of that before my next question, because I think it's relevant here. I can remember negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract. This is like $250 million contract with Rico. And I'm with the executive of Rico, and I know that this is going to be a tough negotiation, and it's going to last literally all day long.
Yeah.
And we walk into the room, and it's in Japan, and they want me to sit on the floor and on a small little cushion, which is normal for some meetings, the way that they operated for a traditional Japanese company as they were. And I remember turning to McKinney Murata, who was my friend, on the other side. And I said, no frickin' way. You're not putting me on the frickin' floor, McKinney. I want a table and chairs, because that I knew that my rear end was going to get sore and they would wear me down. So we want to make sure that that's important. What surprises people the most when they use this approach that you were talking about, you know, process and all the various steps?
I love that. And I think obviously most of my clients come to me for the business, right? They're like, I want to up level my ability to get more, get a better position, get those C-suite spots, get those increased salaries, or I want to make more profit. I want to 10x my income. And we do that, obviously, and this is successful for that. But I think the biggest surprise, actually, Jeffrey, is the impact this has on people's personal relationships. Because as we're going through and learning these skills, they bring them to their intimate partner, they bring them with their kids, and they're building those relationships, which then becomes this gorgeous spiral up. Because as you improve those personal relationships, you show up better in your business, which allows you to buy in, lean in even more to this sort of method. And then that just keeps going up and up. Well, I should be doing like an infinity loop ever up when you buy that. I'd say that's the biggest surprise for people.
Well, you know this, Cindy, you're a real thought leader in this industry and with women leadership. You know, sell you, sell the business, sell you. What's the best advice that you would give to somebody new to negotiating?
Oh, yeah, great question. I would say first, reframe how you look at negotiation. I think the second people hear the word negotiation, and it's one of the obstacles I have with the business, because only people who are aware they need negotiation come looking for it. So I would say the best advice is let go of any of the baggage that you've heard about what it means to negotiate, let go of the image of the boardroom and the power suits, and just recognize that negotiation at its core is about persuading and influencing other people to be able to get best outcomes. So just approach it thinking, I want the best possible outcome here, whatever that looks like, and I'm going to put in the work so that I show up as the best version of myself to be able to try and get that. And that allows you to stay grounded and avoid that pushback. Like I often tell people, choose 3 words that describe how you want to show up in that particular negotiation. So it can be calm, compelling, collected. Maybe you want to be brave and curious. There's no right or wrong answer. So long as you show up with intention at your negotiations, you're already leaps and bounds ahead of most people who show up to the table.
All right, Cindy, I have to ask you this one last question at the risk of getting me banned. I'm going to ask you a question about the bedroom. What, and this might get me in big trouble, but what the heck, it's going to help my ratings. And I think that's a great thing right here on C-Suite TV, C-Suite Radio. Hey, how should someone approach negotiations in the bedroom?
Well, first off, and I love that question, because I think the answer is actually, it rarely takes place in the bedroom. The real work is done when you're outside. So leading up to the bedroom discussion, when you are in an environment that's safe, where we're not feeling judged, where we're not feeling performance pressure or anxiety, being able to build that relationship, start having that negotiation in the most unexpected place. Maybe when you're lying on a beach on vacation, or over a romantic brunch, where you just start teasing the waters and getting really intentional, bringing those models to the table. You're going to end up seeing exponentially better results when you get to the bedroom.
Well said, and you kept it G-rated, which I thought was really good. It helps me. But you, like most things, as we know, Cindy, it's all about being transparent, and it's all about being real. And if you come across as being real, and if you come across as being genuine and transparent, you're going to get a lot further at the boardroom or in the bedroom. And don't forget about all that prep work that you have to do ahead of time. Hey, listen, we were with Cindy Watson. She's the author of The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom, and founder and CEO of Women on Purpose. Make sure you check her out. You go out and buy that book and check out her organization and the services that she provides. And she's also a thought leader in the C-Suite Network. You've been watching live right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hazlett with C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV. Don't forget to tell your friends. Hey, at the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned. And this week, I learned a lot. Most importantly, is to look at it from another perspective. That gender is important in negotiations, whether it's in the boardroom or in the bedroom, to be able to look at it from a whole different perspective. Now, I come off as a little rough, a little hard, a little Mac truckish. And I learned a long time ago, it's better to sit and listen and to mirror the audience across from you. That's not to placate them, but to better to honor them and serve them, and doing so with a different gender or different perspective in mind. And secondly, I learned right here today, prepare, prepare, prepare. It's important to be prepared, and all of the real work getting to the boardroom or even to the bedroom is in the preparation work and all that you do ahead of time. As I said before, always be genuine, always be transparent, and be you. That's how you're the most successful professional that you can be. That's what I learned right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hazlett, right here on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV. Thanks for joining us.